10 years isn't really that long, but the amount of change that underwent the camera industry was massive. What's changed? What sort of changes were they? Do all the changes even matter? Are they going to matter to everyone? Recently, I came across an old DSLR camera, so I thought it'd be a bit of fun to compare it to my more nice and new modern mirrorless camera to see how my journey might have been a bit different if I had have gone old instead of new. Instead of you just enduring me prattling on for the next 10 minutes, I thought I'd get a couple of my mates who are non-camera users to try both these cameras and give me some of their thoughts.
Probably the second one. Actually, I don't know the brand, the Fuji. I like the Fuji better. I know nothing about cameras. I don't take any photos. I take the worst photos you've ever seen. I'm not sure which one I like better. The button to look at the photos was in an awkward spot. The touch screen was much nicer on that one. The ability to change your focus point, which I assume you can't do on the other one, felt like heavier, and the metal finish, even though it's fucking cold as, the metal finish was like, it feels more premium, I guess. It looks cooler as well. I had no idea what the knobs on the top of the Fuji do. So with the first one, it had the screen, and the screen worked, right? So the Fuji one having the screen that you can use as well as the viewfinder at the same time, that is more beginner friendly for someone like me. Well, for something like tonight, with all there's people in close, definitely the Fuji seems like a better option for that. For taking shots at something like a footy game or some sort of sports game, I reckon the Nikon's probably, it might be because it has zoom, but I also like the feel of it in my hand, like the way it felt as well. It felt more professional, I think. Yeah, I'd say it's more comfortable. And then I think overall I enjoyed using the Fuji more, but it might have been because it was a fun event, you know, with friends and stuff like that. So a bit hard to tell, but I did enjoy using the Fuji one tonight. Fuji's the $1,400 one. Wow. Well, I am notoriously quite cheap, so I do like bargains. I wouldn't say, to my mind, there was too much of a difference. That price difference probably wasn't justified, so I would probably then go for the Nikon in that case. I would care more about the actual photos it takes than any of sort of like usability thing. If they took the exact same quality photos, I would not pay the extra $1,000.
Now, for a lot of this video, I'm going to be comparing one camera to another, but I'm going to try to make it as broad as possible. But for this video, yes, the cameras that will be used throughout is a Fujifilm X-T4 and a Nikon D5300. Both APS-C cameras, and both did launch within 7-8 years of each other. Something that cannot be understated in the last 10 years of camera evolution is the advances in terms of form factor, design, and just the overall amount of choice that the consumer is given. This being a DSLR camera, you could mistake this for any number of DSLR cameras because basically they all look more or less the same. Nowadays you can get small cameras, you can get medium-sized cameras, you can get big cameras, and they can all be just as good as each other. You can also get cameras that look a little bit more vintage or unusual that catch the eye, like this camera, for example. This Fuji camera, it's modeled more so after a 70s, 80s, 90s SLR. This sort of thing is becoming ever more popular and prominent, with cameras becoming just as much a fashion accessory or a way to express yourself as much as it is a tool to use to take photos and videos. This is clearly chunkier. Overall, I would also say that it's a lot more noisy. The shutter mechanism, the lens itself, but it's not going to be the same for all lenses. I have definitely noticed that more modern and newer cameras, they do tend to feel a bit nicer, and I think a lot of that is just due to what kind of plastics they use. The overall feel of this camera just is not my favorite. It has a decent bit of grip to hold on to here, but generally it does feel like it's using cheaper plastic. It feels a bit flimsy, the buttons don't feel quite as nice. It does tend to use this weird sort of rubber coating on the body and the lens that feels a little bit sticky, and it doesn't wear nicely over time either. Overall, it feels a little bit cheaper. This would fall between the category of entry level to mid-tier camera. Maybe this is just a me thing. I was just expecting it to feel a bit heavier. The heft that this does have, I think, just mostly comes from the lens as well. So that's probably a good thing too, when you think about it. Won't weigh your neck down too much. And then continuing on the buttons, they don't feel too bad. It's just generally there's too many buttons. There's so many buttons. They're all over this body. It would take a very long time to get muscle memory down pat for using this camera. Can say that the screen is quite nice on this. It is a 1 million dot panel, which is still pretty competitive for the beginner mid-tier level of camera these days. Mid-tiers are pushing probably closer to the 1.62 million dot, but it's still pretty nice overall, although it is not a touchscreen, considering it is quite big. You know, you get used to swiping between photos. Some of the menu options look like they would be touch compatible, but they're not. One of my biggest gripes with actually using this camera was that it only had one command dial. Very frustrating. When trying to shoot in full manual, this rear dial was set to control shutter speed. I couldn't figure out what combination of buttons to press to turn this into an aperture dial. So effectively I could only control the shutter speed and ISO in manual mode and not the aperture. So I just ended up shooting this in aperture control most of the time. I'm sure you can do it somewhere, but I tried looking through the settings, playing with a variety of the different buttons, but I just couldn't figure it out on this one. It's great that even the entry-level style cameras these days are coming out with 2 command dials. Command dials just makes everything so much easier to control, and just using these buttons and combinations and with the one command dial it has is just a nightmare. Moving along, I often find that I wish camera menus were better these days, but after going back to this, I don't really have any more complaints because the menus on this are terrible and it's very difficult to find the very specific setting you're looking for. And I tried to put this camera into the equivalent of autofocus continuous mode to do a small amount of video and testing. And I couldn't find it in any of the regular menu settings. And then I had to look it up, and it took quite a few sites to actually figure out that this little info button here is the equivalent of a quick menu. So for whatever reason, they decided to hide some of these key settings like autofocus continuous mode and your other autofocus settings like 3D tracking, however many points you want, hidden into this quick menu. I don't know, there's an info button on the top of this camera and an I button. I'm not sure what the I is supposed to stand for here, but they could have made that a lot more clear, or make it so you can change the settings within this quick settings and also within the menu. In general, the autofocus on this is a bit of a mixed bag. You know, it's got a decent autofocusing system through the pentaprism. Autofocus is a little bit dicey when you're using directly off the sensor. It's definitely more designed to use looking through the pentaprism. Fairly responsive and snappy, and it's going to be pretty dependent on which lens you are using. This kit lens, not very good. Now, the biggest difference between modern day mirrorless and DSLRs like this, I would say, is probably the video capabilities. Videos just are not very good on this. The autofocus is dicey, can't shoot log, limited to 1080p on this. Just the flexibility and options really are not there. And you don't have IBIS, which is becoming basically a necessity these days, because trying to compete with using a camera or your phone, if you don't have IBIS, then the option's really just always going to be use your phone if you don't want shaky, crazy difficult to watch footage. Some more things I noticed in terms of usability that were kind of annoying. If you did want to change any of the settings while shooting, you have to have this screen open. So you're going to have it out, or you're going to have it closed in, but still open to you. And I often found that when I'm shooting, when you hold down for focus, this screen turns off. But when you're just looking through the viewfinder, getting ready to have your shot open, the screen will often stay on and it just shines right into my eyes. And I found that kind of annoying. If you want to be able to change your settings through this quick menu or any of the other sort of options that you can, it was a little bit frustrating. Then going off that, JPEGs are a lot nicer. You know, comparing to a Fuji is really unfair because it's renowned for having great JPEGs with customizability and film simulations. This, they just look pretty flat, not very nice. Going to be much better off shooting in RAW, or shooting in JPEG in RAW and then doing some minor tweaks to them. It is also kind of difficult to compare cameras like this to more modern mirrorless cameras these days. This, with the kit lens, came out at around $900 US. There aren't too many interchangeable lens cameras that come out at this sort of price range anymore. There's still a few, like you've got a Fujifilm XM5, you've got a couple of choices from Canon, a Sony ZV-E10. Many of them in those cases, like the Sony and Fuji counterparts, they don't come with a viewfinder, so you're a bit limited in that case if you're doing a one-to-one comparison for price over the years. But generally speaking, they're going to have far superior video. Photo quality is probably going to be a little better. You're not going to see too big a difference. In terms of those other more tangible and software features, better menus, more capabilities, more thought out designs instead of just throwing buttons at everything, you're going to have that with these newer cameras. But when I was out and about shooting, I did have a good time with this, not changing too many of the settings, just getting them dialed in and then just shooting. It was pretty good. I didn't have too many issues with it. Well, none really with the camera itself. It was more to do with the lens. Lenses have just gotten so much nicer these days in terms of optics, but also build quality. This just doesn't feel or look particularly nice. The turning on it is very stiff and it doesn't feel great. Just lens design and the overall hand feel has just advanced leaps and bounds in 10 years. It's amazing. But basically everything I've complained about here has directly been addressed by the mirrorless. That's why I'm saying things are constantly getting so much better. They don't always feel like massive changes, but it's enough of these smaller changes that make up a very big difference overall. But if you're just shooting photos from time to time, just get a better lens than a kit lens like this, and you're probably going to be able to have a pretty great time. The image quality is, got 24 versus 26 megapixel sensor camera here. Couldn't find too many issues with it. Obviously, for video, it doesn't shoot log and it doesn't shoot 4K. I did a direct dynamic range comparison for photos, and the newer camera was substantially better than that. I increased the shadows to 100 in Lightroom in this, and everything just turned green. It's pretty insane. Generally a bit softer. You can probably get rid of the green, but it's just introducing so much color noise. It was frankly shocking. Now, more so generally speaking, mirrorless cameras have had a lot of niceties to advance the overall user experience over the years, like Wi-Fi photo transfer. A lot of the time you can just initiate that on your phone, or you can automatically have them sent to your phone straight away these days. Really handy and convenient. The video quality and autofocus performance just leaps and bounds better, not even a competition. A lot of newer cameras have built-in protocols, so you can just plug your camera right into your laptop and use it as a webcam if you so choose. Get really nice video footage, maybe look good in a job interview. You can be known as that guy that's kind of a wanker that looks a little bit pretentious in all the work video meetings. Generally, third-party lenses have become more affordable and competitive than ever. Before, they were just a secondary option if you couldn't afford a first-party lens, but now they're just genuinely amazing and rival the performance of the first-party lenses for a fraction of the price. Another part of the user experience that's a lot more subjective was when I first got into photography, I bought a camera, never really had any intentions to shoot any sort of video whatsoever, but look at me now. A couple more talking points on this camera here specifically and the DSLR experience. First of all, it is nice looking through the lens with the Pentaprism viewfinder here. Don't have to turn the camera on to see anything. You're not looking at a screen all the time. Quite nice. But when you have this LCD that flips out and you can use it as a live view screen, it does make the experience a little bit disjointed because you have to remember to press this little switch here to turn it on to the live view. Then if you go back to the regular method of shooting, you have to do it again, or you have to close it, and then you find yourself closing and opening it and fiddling with settings a lot more. Newer cameras, they just have a little sensor so they recognize when you're putting the camera up to your eye and it automatically switches over. Cameras back in the day were a lot more likely to come with a little built-in flash. Really underrated feature. Always handy to have one, especially these days. That sort of hard light look for taking photos of friends and food and just whatever is really popular and in right now. You can save yourself quite a chunk of money going for something older like this, still have a blast and still get some great photos out of it. But also, at the end of the day, this camera is probably worth like $250 Australian versus the Fuji X-T4 that I'm sort of comparing it to is worth about $1,400–1,500. You're happy to just shoot with a few more minor annoyances that make the experience a little bit less polished and, carry around a camera that's worth significantly less, so you're not as worried about someone stealing it or accidentally getting broken or handing it to someone you don't feel like that they're about to drop it, your life's about to end. At the end of the day, it's still a camera, it still shoots good photos, and it's still plenty usable. But personally, I am obviously excited to go back to shooting with my more modern mirrorless camera.